Travel Talk, where our expert magical memory planners discuss ways you can have fun, memorable, and stress-free family vacations. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Travel Talk. I am so excited to talk to you today about cruising out of the Northeast. I have recently been on 2 ship tours out of New Jersey, and it just reminded me that so many people are unfamiliar with the idea that you can go on a cruise out of multiple ports out of the Northeast that might be a drivable option for you. So most people think of cruises to the Bahamas and the Caribbean, and they think of those leaving out of Florida ports. And we think about Alaska leaving out of the West and European cruises like Mediterranean leaving out of Europe. But sometimes people aren't aware that there are lots of cruise ports right in the Northeast, and these very well may be in your backyard and something that's very drivable for you. So I'm going to talk through several of the cruise ports that are in the Northeast, what cruise lines leave from those ports, which is super important because the ships do tend to move around. So I'm not going to get into the detail of what ship will be in port from that cruise line, because although that might be true today, 6 months from now, it could be something different. So we'll talk about it at the cruise line level to see what cruise lines are offering sailings from those ports. We'll talk about some typical itineraries that leave out of those ports. And then at the end, we're going to just touch base on some of the advantages that you might consider when you're cruising out of the Northeast. So we're going to start at the port that's furthest to the north, and that is Boston. So Boston has a great cruise port. We did that ourselves one year. We did a fall cruise and saw beautiful fall foliage. And so Boston is a great port, whether you're within driving distance or maybe it's an area that you wanted to go visit and do some of the historical areas of Boston, but maybe wanted to add something extra. So you could then add the cruise on to that from there. And so out of Boston, you'll typically find either a New England, Canada itinerary. And these are cruises that will stop along the states that are north of Boston. So things like they might go to Martha's Vineyard, they might go to Bar Harbor, places in Maine. And then they'll head up into Canada. And so you can go to things like the Bay of Fundy and some of those areas, lots of historical things to see, beautiful scenery. There's some national parks. So great, great itinerary, especially in the fall because the foliage is gorgeous up there. And so that might be an option. You could also do an itinerary that goes south. Sometimes they go down to Bermuda. Sometimes they go as far as the Bahamas. Usually those are longer sailings. And then there are some that are actually transatlantic that'll leave out of Boston and head over to Europe. So that's another option. So there are 4 cruise lines that generally will leave out of Boston. They're Royal Caribbean, Celebrity Cruise Line, Princess Cruise Line, and Norwegian Cruise Line. So they have ships in that area, maybe 1, maybe 2 with different itineraries, and generally most of the year. So that is the first cruise port I wanted to touch base on that people don't really think of. So then as you come a little further south, you will come to the port that is in New York City. So New York City has a pretty good sized port in the Manhattan terminal. This is something that maybe you want to drive in, park in the parking garage, add a pre or post time in New York City if that's something that you want to see. Maybe you live nearby and you want to take the train in or do something like that. You could also drive in from outside the city and do like a park and cruise where you stay at a hotel the night before just outside the city where you can leave your car. And then the morning of the cruise, take an Uber, a taxi, a hotel transfer, something into the city for the departure of your cruise. Or you might have a family member that doesn't mind dropping you off and maybe spending the afternoon in the city after they drop you off. So lots of great options if you're thinking of sailing out of New York City. And it's really a cool sailing because as you leave, you get to see that New York City skyline. You'll pass by the Statue of Liberty. You'll go under some bridges. So it's really kind of a neat way to start a cruise vacation. There are lots of cruise lines that actually leave out of New York City. So some of the ones that we book as well is Norwegian Cruise Line, Carnival Cruise Line, MSC Cruises, which is one that people aren't as familiar with, Princess Cruise Line, and Disney Cruise Line all leave out of New York City. So again, they have some really great options and itineraries, whether you're going north to that Canada, New England, itinerary south to Bermuda is popular, as well as some Bahamas and even longer cruises that will go all the way down into the Caribbean, and as well as some transatlantics that'll leave out of New York and then head over to Europe. So that's kind of like a one way, and then you fly home. So the next option, which is real nearby, but actually a very different experience getting to, is in New Jersey. So it's in Bayonne, New Jersey, where you might not be familiar with that area, or you might have a preconceived notion about that area, but it's really very beautiful as you're approaching the cruise port. There's like some new shopping centers. There's a Costco, there's a Starbucks, there is a CVS, which I seem to always get there a little early with just enough time to pick up a Starbucks. And if you forget something, you can hit it at CVS and grab some last minute items and then be ready to go down to the cruise port. So there is a really nice parking garage there. So you can just park right there at the cruise port if you want to do that. Of course, you might have a friend that wants to drop you off or stay at a nearby hotel again, but this is a great option. You don't actually have to go into the city to get there. So if you're coming in from Pennsylvania or the surrounding area, you're just going to take like 78, which is a main road, and it basically goes right there. So super easy. I've driven this twice in the last month to go to ship tours from Pennsylvania, and it's just a really easy drive right out 78 and then right down to the ship. So this is a great option as well if you're looking for something that's very drivable if you're in the Northeast. And there are two cruise lines that leave out of Bayonne, New Jersey. The one is Royal Caribbean Cruise Line, and the other is Celebrity Cruise Line. And they usually have a couple ships each that will do cruises out of here. And they will go to, sometimes they'll go north up to New England, and then the Canada New England itinerary. They'll go to Bermuda, they'll go to the Bahamas, and then down to the Caribbean as well. So lots of options from this port, which can be really easy to get to if you are outside of New York City and in the surrounding area. So another really great option to consider. Then the last port we're going to talk about is a little further south than that, and that is the port of Baltimore. So again, if you're within driving distance of Baltimore, whether you're in the Washington, D.C. area and want to come up north, or if you're a little bit west of there, there are several options of coming into Baltimore that can make it really easy to head out on a cruise. So there are a couple cruise lines out of Baltimore. There's Royal Caribbean, Norwegian Cruise Line, and Carnival Cruise Line all leave from this port, having several itineraries. And again, they'll do that Canada, New England, they'll do Bahamas, they'll do Bermuda, and down to the Caribbean. So a lot of those options are still available out of Baltimore, and again, gives you another choice of a drivable port. So what are the advantages of leaving from the Northeast? So if you live in this area, it is really a time saver and a money saver if you don't have to purchase airfare for your family, if you don't have to add the extra nights of flying in a day before and then maybe traveling home afterwards, needing extra time. So if you're trying to do something very quick, it can be very easy if these are a drivable port for you to get in and out. And then you don't have those added complications of either airfare cost, airfare delays. If the ship is late coming back into port for some reason, it's fine because you're just hopping in your car and driving home. So it gives you a lot more flexibility and can be a little bit less stressful to add into those other traveling situations. It can also make a really great land and sea. So if you're not from one of those areas, but that's an area you've wanted to visit, maybe you want to see Philadelphia, New York, and you're kind of road tripping around that area, but you want to add something else. Or again, you want to head up to Boston and you want to see that area and some of the historical things there, but then also add something else. It can make a really fun land and sea option to combine the cities in these areas with a cruise option as well. Another cool thing about these sailings is they do appeal to the drive market. So you'll find that on these sailings, there are a lot of people that are within driving distance. And we've had customers let us know that they got on board and sure enough, they found somebody that knew somebody they knew or worked somewhere that they worked in the past or had some connection, because there are a lot of people that are from nearby and they tend to also cruise at these ports regularly. And so people will find people from year to year that they've seen before on cruises. Sometimes the kids make friends, and it's fun because if they make a friend with somebody that doesn't live all that far from you, they might be able to reconnect after the vacation. So it's really kind of fun to have that vibe of people that you may know or people that live near you when you get on the ship. So there are just really really great options from the Northeast, something to consider. When people come to us and ask us for a vacation, sometimes they have all these things they want to do, but the budget is tight. And when I start explaining that they have some cruise ports nearby that they could leave out of, it allows them to shift maybe some of the money they were going to use on transportation into the cruise itself. So that might mean extra excursions, an upgraded room, a drink package, spa, all those things that they can put into the vacation instead of spending getting to the vacation. So just wanted to bring that to you this on this podcast and talk about some of these Northeast cruise port destinations. If you're thinking about cruising is very popular, so we would love to help you with that. Bon voyage and have a great day.